President Trump says both Russia and Ukraine want to settle the war ahead of planned talks between U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia next week. So is a peace deal in sight? Retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Rob Spalding with me now. General, great to have you with us. It's certainly taking longer than President Trump told us it would. I think he said he would solve this war on day one. But is he moving in the right direction in terms of getting the parties, one, to the table and then getting the outlines of a deal in place?
I think he is. First of all, I mean, he recognizes that we're in a three-front Cold War, and the biggest challenge that we face, really for the world, is nuclear weapons. And so he understands that at the most, he has to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so, at the second thing he's going to have to do is prey on the fears of both Zelensky and Putin. And it's not that they have a complete victory or a complete loss, is they have to worry about on each side how much territory they stand to further lose. And so he had to actually get them to compete. What he's got to be worried about, though, right now is that Putin is trying to exploit this advantage to get more territory before they sign a ceasefire.
Yeah, and it does look, on the face of it at least, General, that the way a deal will eventually shape up will give Russia some of the territory that it illegally invaded. Is that just a reality the world, and Ukrainians in particular, have to accept, that there is a reward for that sort of aggressive military action?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a reward, but that's a reality. Look at the Korean War. I mean, we're still in an armistice there. That's not a peace. It is a ceasefire that has stood many, many decades, and that's what the president is trying to get to here. And I think by letting Zelensky think that he has a path to total victory, when in reality, with Russia having so many nuclear weapons, there's no way to get there for him. I think that was the fault of the West. You know, we almost, created this sense in Zelensky that he could ask for whatever he wanted. And so I think the president has put him in his place. But now he's got to be worried about Putin and taking it too far. So now he's got to prey on the fears of Putin that he may lose more territory than he's already gained. And the way that that's going to happen is by putting pressure there in Ukraine. So he's probably going to have to release some weapons to Ukraine to allow them to push back a little bit. But then he's going to have to put pressure hard on both sides to get to a ceasefire.
And General, do you think there were, at the start of this at least, there was a hope within the Biden administration, or a belief perhaps, and among some European countries, that this war might eventually lead to the fall of Putin? But President Trump has come in with a hard reality and acceptance that Putin isn't going anywhere, and therefore you have to do a deal.
Again, look at Korea and Vietnam. We had the reality of nuclear war kind of hanging in the balance. We still have that. And unfortunately, within the Washington, D.C. national security establishment, they've completely lost the plot. It is the president that's bringing sanity back to the front of the bargaining table. It is not the fall of Ukraine or the total victory of Russia we have to worry about. It is nuclear war created because we have this false sense that Ukraine can win all their territory back and not potentially create a nuclear war in the process.
And General, this does seem to be the beginning of a historic shift in terms of Europe realizing that Europe has to be more responsible for its defense, take on more of the burden than just depending on the United States to have its back always. Do you see this as a historic shift?
Well, no, because they can't come together. No matter what, it's still not a federal republic like the United States. And so all these countries have their own individual interests. I mean, look, you saw Zelensky go to talk to Starmer and then all of a sudden come back and say, okay, we realize we need the U.S. I mean, that is the reality. And so, the United States becomes this essential player in really figuring out the ceasefire in Ukraine. But it really comes from the fears of both Zelensky and Putin and what more they stand to lose by not coming to some kind of interim agreement that gets this war to end. Again, though, you can't forget that this is a three-front Cold War. It is Taiwan, it is Israel, and it is Ukraine right now. But we're trying to get to a ceasefire in Ukraine, but other things will pop off over time.
Yeah, it is an extraordinary, complicated and complex world in which we live. Thank you for guiding us through it, General Rob Spalding. Thank you so much, sir.